opening. And what I would like to do, if I could just find my mouse, is to stop sharing my screen and to introduce the keynote speaker that we'll have until 11 o'clock, Francis Paulisch. I am super happy and excited that we have Francis joining us. Francis, feel free to turn on your video and maybe start sharing your screen if you want to do that. But Francis has a long and established career at Siemens, running very many different things. He was also very active in the software engineering community. More recently, she found greener pastures and started to work for Siemens Healthineers, really driving the software initiative at Siemens Healthineers. And I'm extremely grateful, Francis, that you agreed to take the time to give a keynote presentation for us. And I'm really excited to hear you talk about one of the key things that we see happen in the digital transformation, which is going from a more transactional value delivery, where you basically sell a machine or a device or whatever, to a continuous value flow. And I'm really grateful that you took the time and were willing to give us the keynote. And with that, Francis, I would like to hand the floor to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jan. I'm honored to serve as a keynote speaker for this software-centered reporting workshop. So as Jan mentioned, the focus of this keynote is about how we are shifting gears at Siemens Healthineers towards a continuous value flow. Maybe one slide to start off with. Who are Siemens Healthineers, right? We are very closely aligned with Siemens, but we are also an independent company and are very active in the medical technology area. So we have a lot of imaging products, things like computed tomography devices, magnetic resonance, but also things like lab diagnostic machines, of course, very important in these corona days, ultrasound devices, and also increasingly products that are more in the cloud space, and also artificial intelligence that's also addressed at the Software Center very well is also a topic that is very much on our agenda. So we have, for example, a product called the AI Rad Companion that is a AI-powered, cloud-based intelligent assistant for the radiologists. And so we are, as you can see, moving in also more and more into the kind of digitalization and new normal, as Jan said, kinds of areas. And so we are very much, I think, as many of you also participating in this event, in this transition space. Regarding software, we do have a large number of software engineers, so we're fairly large. We have about 4,000 software engineers, and I'm the head of the so-called software initiative, where we try to bring these software engineers and all of the, not just the engineers, but also the product management and everything in between, and really get the organization focused on the software and digitalization topics. And in that area, digitalization and accelerating the pace of change through digitalization that you mentioned, I have one slide on this here that I'd like to focus on, that digitalization is much more than just shifting the functionality from what was done previously non-digital to digital. You know, changing out this feature was previously done in a mechanical way, and we're now doing that in a software way. That is just sort of replacing individual parts. That is much, much too short a jump. We really need to go way beyond that and to think in the areas of how can we think outside the box beyond just, well, it's just one other way of realizing functionality, into the new ways of working and the new business opportunities. Can we reach new customers? Can we use AI? Can we use the data to add value in other areas, right? We can potentially reach other kinds of customers and so on. So we need to think out of the box. What are the additional things where software and digitalization enables this? And of course, this transformation requires us to shift on many aspects, right? We cannot just change parts of the organization and parts of the products. It's really a holistic approach. And this is showing that the this fast changing world is driving this shift to more continuous value stream, right? We at Siemens Healthineers, and also it's the same at Siemens. I think it's the same at all of the software center companies. I think we're all in the same boat, so to speak here. We're all having these accelerating innovation cycles. The complexity is increasing, and we need to keep that under control. And complexity not only in the product itself, but also our organizations, for example. And that's why we also very much welcome that the Software Center also addresses these organizational and business topics as well. And as we're moving into more software driven, the pace of change of the software technologies is changing all the time also. And within all of this, we of course have to still keep and further enhance the foundation that we have, right? We have safety critical systems, we have high quality standards, we have regulatory approvals. And so we, as also many of you, have also these other additional challenges, right? If it was software only, the challenge wouldn't be as challenging as it is for, you know, larger industrial medical kinds of companies. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. We're in a more volatile world where we need to learn to adapt and also drive the adaptation, take advantage of the additional flexibility and adaptiveness that we can have in this new world. So I noticed Jan always has his stairway to heaven, and now this digital transformation, again, 5 levels. We also have 5 levels here showing the fast feedback cycles that are needed. So we have a sort of a generic PLM process shown here at the top, and how we go from sort of more agile development, where you have these fast feedback cycles within the R&D. So within the coding and testing, this is basically where the home of agile development. But the focus that we have in this presentation, and the focus also of my work at Siemens Healthineers, is more this continuous delivery, continuous deployment and operations, going over this dotted line to actually delivering this in this faster pace also to the end customer. So not just within R&D, but how can we do more about getting, you know, sort of say agile all the way to the end customer and doing these continuous deployments, continuous operations. The terms used here are not so well established in the external community. So there are people that have different understandings. What do they call continuous delivery? So some persons, like the quote here of Dave Farley that I have on the right, he refers to continuous delivery also, I think, also to being what we would consider continuous deployment all the way to the end customer. But I think everybody agrees on this kind of understanding that we need to be able to not only have this continuous way of working within the R&D and within the company itself, but also where feasible, also to the end customers. And continuous delivery, according to Farley, is basically that you try to keep your software continuously in a releasable state. So that's sort of this borderline here, that you can have it ready to be released, and then if needed, can then be released. And we have different types of products at Siemens Healthineers that I mentioned, and they are at different places here. You know, for things like our scanners, we're more in this continuous delivery area focused on. We're not going over the line here. We're working on applying also continuous delivery techniques and approaches also to our systems, right? Also not just to software only, but to systems. And then we have other parts of the other products that are more in this cloud space here, where it's of course much easier to do continuous delivery all the way, you know, through all the way to the end customer through the cloud kinds of approaches. Here I'd like to focus on 2 slides, the benefits and the challenges. So the benefits that we get depend also on where we are on this. You know, are we at step 3, step 4, step 5 of this sort of maturity scale, I guess you could say. And we're able to deliver more customer value at higher quality in time if we are able to have this continuous delivery. It's really already tested. It's not like we have a set of PowerPoint and documentation and so on. We are really ready with the full system. It just hasn't gone through the final steps it needs to take, and so we're better able to deliver that. And if we can get into this continuous deployment, then we can actually deliver the value to the customers. Update, the cybersecurity as we need. We need to always provide the cybersecurity patches and also do this in a continuous way. And we have a lot of focus also on this cybersecurity topic, and are handling that topic, in my view, very, very well. We also, this topic at the bottom about reduced deployment and operational risk, you can imagine if you can get into this flow, into this way of working where the things you are releasing are much smaller chunks of work, then that also reduces the risk, right? And it makes it easier to approve smaller chunks of work, right? If it's some 2 weeks work rather than 2 or 10 months worth of work, it's easier to check if it's okay to go out. And so this also reduces the risks, and you get more and more used to doing this way, and you sort of get into the flow, so to speak, literally. And this is where we're trying to get to, and that we're always making a lot of good progress to this. And eventually, as also I think many of the software center drivers like Helena, we're getting into this continuous data-driven value increase for the customers. But to achieve this, there's lots of challenges as well. So we have challenges because we have regulated environments, we have a lot of on-premise embedded systems, and so we have a lot of challenges sort of shown here on the onion. And we also have a range of challenges. We like to separate them into business challenges, process and organization challenges, and technology challenges. And you have to shift gears, so to say, on all of these topics. It is not sufficient just to change the business approach if the technology is not sufficient. And similarly, you cannot just make all these technology changes to enable this if you don't correspondingly make the changes on the business side. And so we have to take a holistic view on this topic. And this is why I named the keynote here, Shifting Gears Towards Continuous Value Flow, because like shifting gears in a car, you can't change just one aspect. It really requires changes in many aspects. And I think many of you here, like Volvo and so on, you probably have a better understanding of this than I do. But I think similarly, the shift from the more mechanical gears that we had in the older days to more drive-by-wire and these more digital approaches is also a similar shift. I mean, there it's even more obvious that you can't just change one part, right? You have to. There's no halfway to drive-by-wire. You really make a major shift to this other way of working. And perhaps here I wanted to point out a short statement. I wanted to learn to drive a stick shift, which is why I show a stick shift. So I wanted to learn to drive a stick shift, but I couldn't find a manual. You have to get the joke, okay? I wanted to drive a stick shift. I wanted to learn to drive a stick shift, but I couldn't find a manual. Okay, so back to the serious part. We have for products this shift to this continuous value flow, and it requires all 5 of these topics: the business, process, organization, technology, and culture. And you can imagine, think about it on your own, which of these is more challenging. Obviously it's more the culture topics and the business aspects, right? Getting the technology to work is probably the easiest of these topics, for example. And so we have all 5 of these topics that we address here. I have one slide. I'm sorry it's a little bit full, but in case you want to have a more scientific and mathematical understanding on why this works, because a lot of times we argue in more sort of cultural, and we need to work together and collaboration will let us, bring dev and ops together and so on. But there really are also scientific and mathematical based reasons why this works. And it's especially because we're in this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous area, this VUCA world. And if you're in this VUCA world, then you need this fast feedback, right? And if you're doing product development, it's really a stochastic system with cues, and you have these non-linear, non-deterministic activities. And so if you think about it in this way, this is why getting the flow to work and focusing on the system throughput, getting these cars through this traffic jam on the highway. This is the kind of approach we're trying to achieve in product development. And another totally separate mathematical kind of approach to this. There's a blog post called The Simple Math of DevOps that shows this formula that has a top part and a bottom part, and how the top part is basically all of these silos. You need to do the planning, design, develop, and of course this multiple times in the iterations. But you have these sum of the time at the top, and at the bottom part, in the denominator, you have the trust, which could be 0 to 1, right? Some percentage. And if you have no trust between the silos, if it's 0, then you're at infinity, right? And if you have full and complete trust, then you are only hampered by the time you have on the top part of this equation. And that's why the topic of trust and being able to build the between, for example, the dev and the ops teams is so important. So I think maybe thinking about it this way, I hope, is providing an insight that perhaps you hadn't thought about it that way before. So going through quickly these 4 topic areas of business, organization, and so on, we need to think outside of the box, the new business models. Data is, of course, a really important topic, and not just the data from the customers, in our case, the images and so on, but also the internal data that we have in our huge amounts of information in our configuration management systems, our defect tracking systems, right? There's a lot of software a lot of data in our software engineering tools, and we can use this as well. So we need data, really a bigger picture on both sides of that topic. And we want to allow different pace of change at the customer. We've traditionally had sort of a yearly release of our equipment to the customer. And now when we have all of these levels on the right, we have the cloud, we have the edge, we have the equipment, we're able to have the possibility of having basically an ecosystem at our customer, and have each of these individual parts have a different pace of change, right? We can update the cloud or update the mobile tablet on the scanner at a different pace of change than the scanner itself, right? And we need to focus on the value that we can get from the customer, right? If we know which features are being used, then we can make further improvements to those parts. And that's our connection to the product management topic again. Being able to do like A/B testing, these kinds of things are all business related topics, and enabling us to slice the products into smaller independent chunks that we can then potentially release that way. And even as Kent Beck, who drove the extreme programming topic many years ago, and also active today, we need to get the information very quickly from these feedbacks, right? We need to get that information very fast to go forward appropriately. And in the process area, this is showing a picture of sort of our past or traditional view here, that we have these 1 year kinds of deliveries, and then there are a whole number of checks that are done here on this release of a new version, right? We're trying to get, where possible, and it depends on the product, get more into this lower part of the picture here, where we have this continuous value stream, being able to basically move some of the effort and the things that are done here, spread them out over time, shift those to the left, do some of those more in an automated way, do some of those things more with a delta analysis, right? Where we do an analysis at one time, and then we have the next feature coming up, and maybe that test or that thing that we're checking there in our process isn't relevant for that particular feature, and then we can skip over it, or maybe maybe it's not, and of course then we have to do it. But if we can shift these things left, automate them, do these delta analysis, actually the sum of those little petrol colored or turquoise colored ones at the bottom should actually be less than the effort we're putting in this old style world, in these sort of 1 year release kind of way, because we can also automate a lot of that. And that really helps us also on the culture, because through that automation, we get a lot more transparency and everybody's on the same page, from the product management to the testers to the developers, and everybody is working in a collaborative way and they're all on the same page here. And that also is a big help also for the culture. So we basically split the work from big units into lots of little units that are released over time, and keep the product as much as possible in a releasable state. And we do this, as I mentioned, not only for our sort of cloud or other systems, but also for our scanner kinds of systems. For our scanner kinds of systems, we do this for this continuous delivery, being able to deliver. So being able to work in this continuous way to the scanner that is still on site at our location. So not over the wall to the customer, but inside still. But we're always making progress and pushing the envelope, so to speak. On the organization, we strive to have smaller teams and encourage experimentation and being able to have this independence. I think having this independence is really important for speed. I know at the Software Center, we're always talking about speed, speed, speed. And I think it's very important to say, yes, speed is really important, but we should be aware that it's really independence of the parts, being able to do those independently, and then each one of those can be done faster, and we can combine them faster. So it's really, independence is, in my view, sort of a precursor to speed. It is enabling the speed that we need. And we need to also find a balance, though, between this independence and a common approaches. If everybody just totally did things totally different, we have a lot of things that are cross-cutting concerns. And so there are, of course, a certain balance that we have to have between enabling this independence that fosters speed and having this common approach that we need, since we are developing, systems that have a lot of common cross-cutting concerns. And we have to use meaningful KPIs. If we apply KPIs that sort of come from this plan-driven waterfall kind of world to continuous delivery, that won't help us. We need KPIs that address topics like the throughput and the stability of the systems. And we do a lot of things, and that's one of the main things that I do at the Siemens Healthineers, is these best practice sharing across the whole organization and make sure that everybody knows these things. We do things. We had recently a webinar series, maybe similar to the brown bag series that Jan mentioned in the opening. We called it continuous delivery of continuous delivery, because we had every week a short 30-minute session on a different independent feature or topic from the next week, right? And we were able to, stay intact. Everybody knew we had 30 minutes of good content on continuous delivery, some different aspect, and we just had it every week after each other, but they were independent, and still it was a good whole view of the whole system, looking at the topic of continuous delivery from lots of different perspectives. And you see, especially here, this DevOps kind of topic I tried to show here in this cartoon here, where it really shows, German, we say we're in the same boat, right? If we have the dev people doing lots of innovation and crazy stuff and new features, and the ops team is trying to get the product out the door, we are in the same boat, right? We're in the same company. We need to make sure that these teams work together well, because we're all in the same boat, right? We sink or swim together. Just a short slide on the software curriculum. This is a topic, an architecture-based training program that we have established originally at Siemens and have now continued and strengthened further at Siemens Healthineers. 2 years ago, almost to the day, Gerd Höfner presented a keynote at the Software Center reporting workshop, and he described the topic of us being a learning organization and the importance of training and learning. And this is also a pyramid of trainings topics that he mentioned also in his presentation then. And it's a connection here that we have also, there's a lot of content in this pyramid, in this training content that is about avoiding dependencies, test-driven development, automation, all of these topics, the technical topics and the organizational and process topics that we need to drive these topics. And we are also explicitly adding now continuous delivery and DevOps topics into the program. And we work a lot to ensure that the voice of the architects that we have at the company is very much valued, and that is heard, and that plays an important role in our strategy. If you're interested in seeing a YouTube video of a recent presentation we did on the architecture of this architect program, there's a pointer here in YouTube, and I mentioned in my closing slide also a pointer to this content. On the technology area, I think the technology part is probably the easiest of these, especially if you're in the software only world. There are so many people that are doing this, you know, eBay and Amazon and so on. So the challenge here is how to apply this also to more systems world, where we have physical systems, cyber physical systems, regulatory approaches and so on. So we need to keep the use the architecture to modularize the systems, you know, try to have, for example, maybe the safety critical parts of the system in one part of the system and have things that are not safety critical in another part of the system if the architecture enables that those can be done more independently. This is the orange box here shows a quote from a DevOps report about the importance of architecture. So for us, the topic of architecture is extremely important for this topic. And this is another sort of external source that provides some additional sort of more neutral area view on why architecture is really an enabler for this kind of topic, and that it's so important. And you need to factor your system so that artifacts that change at similar rates are together. That's a quote by Brian Foote and Joe Yoder. And that, for example, would apply to the case I just mentioned here about safety. One other thing I wanted to mention on the technology area is this technical excellence. And so we have a big agile transition at Siemens Healthineers, going on further to push even further, not just to agile, but to continuous delivery and DevOps. And technical excellence is also one of these 9 principles behind the Agile Manifesto that's mentioned here, you know, established many years ago. So we need, even there, it says we need to have this technical excellence in order to achieve the agility. So similar to the arguments had on the previous slide. And we need to be able to really have not only working code, but it really has to be readable, have low technical debt, and be able to meet these additional attributes that we have to the system. So we need to find the right balance between features and well-crafted systems. And so we have established a software craftsmanship community. We like to use the gardening metaphor. I think, you know, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but you like to, if you had a garden, you would, you know, make sure that you take care of your garden well, you know, make sure it's watered, make sure you have the good nutrients in it in order for your feature flowers and your feature trees to grow and to blossom and to bring value. So that's sort of the analogy we use here in this space. So in summary, we try to address many aspects when moving towards this continuous value stream. Again, many of these topics I've mentioned, we need to focus on continuously bringing value to the customer. In the product management area, we need to slice these into the smaller independent features, manage the complexity throughout, both in the product and in the organization, structure the system to avoid dependencies so that we can try to have these more independence, and more simpler things will allow us to get the speed that we need. Get the feedback, make database decisions based on that. Don't decide because of your gut feeling, but make decisions based on the data, right? Like Deming even says, right? We need to we must really decide based on the data. Use the KPIs that are suited for continuous value stream way of working. Automate as much as possible. That also gives us a lot of data, and most important, also explicitly focus on the culture. That's really the essential foundation. And You may notice we're going into the next part of the Software Center reporting workshop that this happens to, maybe by chance, maybe not by chance. It matches very, very well to the Software Center topics, right? We address at the Software Center product management, software architecture, metrics, ecosystems, cyber-physical systems, data-driven decisions, enterprise scale, continuous integration and delivery. So I think this is maybe a good opening or closing of mine and a good transformation to the remainder of the reporting workshop today, because we showed here how many of the topics that we're addressing at the Software Center are really of critical importance to industrial and medical companies such as ours and such as yours among you in the audience. I point here to 3 papers. I mentioned the one here about the software curriculum. Also, we have 2 other papers that I have not mentioned that are also published at IEEE conferences and workshops. One on continuous security patch delivery, so the cybersecurity topic, and also a 3rd paper about transforming a medical organization that also includes cyber physical systems towards speed and flow. So if you're interested in any of these, please let me know. In general, if you have questions now or in the future, please don't hesitate to contact me. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Francis. That was awesome. Several people commented on your boat picture. And I saw that Frederick Hugelson also was really enjoying it, and it reminded me, I can't remember where I heard a quote where someone says to a group of people, we better hang together or else we will for sure hang separately, which I thought was one of those interesting interesting quotes. So in order, we have time for a few questions. And there are a few in the chat, and I'm going to read them out, and then maybe you can talk a little bit about this. There is a question from Marcus from Saab. What would you say are the most important KPIs? What would be the top 2 KPIs that you track at Siemens Healthineers?
Well, I mentioned them in the presentation. For this continuous, we really very much measure the stability and throughput. There's a external speaker that we've had speak with us called Steve Smith. I think he's now with Equal Experts. He's based in England and had been with I've forgotten now where he was, but I think he's now with Equal Experts. And they have a particular way of measuring stability and throughput. I think Mick Kerr flow metrics is another person that has a very similar approach. So measuring the stability and the flow throughout, those would be my recommendation. And I can point gladly to further explicit pointers to that if needed.
Excellent. Now we have time for one more question before we need to switch to the community sessions. And that is, and Marcus says, thanks. Jesper Derhaag from Ericsson is also having a question. Any insights on the organizational structure and its impact on your architecture? Given Conway's law, how does Siemens handle organizational structure and how it relates to decoupling the architecture? I mean, how do you also decouple teams is the question.
Yes, well, we try to work together in sort of virtual. So that is one approach. I know in particular in our cloud-based approaches that they are very much focused on doing like, well, they also do a lot of pair programming, but they also structure their whole delivery pipeline so that these teams are very independent from each other and that they really can decide themselves what is the right things to take from the backlog and to do, and we really encourage their independence and allow them to do that and to keep that team together. They all have the right sort of common understanding on where the overall project is going, but they're able to also have a lot of independence within the teams.
Right. Good. Now, with that, I'm afraid that we need to end this part of the session. Thank you all very, very much for Francis. Thank you once again for a wonderful keynote presentation.
Yep.
Really nice to get the insight in how Siemens is handling this.
Siemens Healthineers.
Siemens Healthineers. Sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right. My apologies. I need to quickly take over the screen share, if that's okay with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I was hoping to point everyone to this page, because we're going to hang up on this Teams link now. I suppose that you're all aware of this page where it says the reporting workshop. The next session, there are 4 in parallel. So the software engineering, product management and systems engineering and AI engineering session. Pick the community update that you want to join, and then the Teams link is behind it. So please go and switch to the Teams link or for the community group that you actually want to be part of. Once again, Francis, wonderful presentation, the best possible way to kick off the day as far as I'm concerned. So thank you once again for doing that. Very much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
And I look forward to seeing many of you in the AI engineering session or any of the other community sessions. So see you there. Thank you all very much. And thanks, Francis.
Yep.